Okay, so I've got that on, and being an Australian, I typically talk softer than most of my American colleagues. So if at any time you hear me taper off into some sort of drawly sound, just wave your hand and say, could you repeat that, please? Or if I pronounce something that doesn't quite sound right, let me know and I'll translate it into North American for you. I'm very good at doing that. It's the only way that I can get an order through the drive-through correctly. So, okay, so I think everybody's here. Thank you. I'm just going to do a couple of plugs. Firstly, thank you to folks at Healthwise. It's amazing how small a valley is. There's someone who I worked with at Albertson's SuperValue, who I actually mentored as part of their sort of UX development. And they ended up moving on to Healthwise. And out of the blue, they pinged me and said, hey, a chance to speak, a chance to meet some other IAs. And I said, right there. So, thanks to Healthwise for sponsoring. Thanks to Paul King for helping me, sort of get situated with what I could do. And then I also just wanted to thank the first two presenters because you wonderfully tied into so many things. I was just going, yes, yes, yes. So I just wanted to call out with the first presentation about the whole centrality of language in information architecture. And for me, that really resonated because language, and you'll understand why, for me is just one of the most sort of primal ways that we see cognition in action. That might not make a lot of sense. It's a little bit esoteric, but when you sort of see my focus on things, you'll get the bent. And then Wendy, I have to say, I heart sketch and envision, and I spend most of my waking hours in sketch and with envision. So I felt the pain and the joy and the glory that is material design as well. So it's a very, very useful tool. Thank goodness, because I was still not recovering from fireworks being deprecated. It's a whole other story. So anyway, taxonomy in the wild, text mining with R. No, that is not a typo. That is just the letter R, just in case some people were not sure about that. So R. So anyway, for taxonomy in the wild, it's a little bit of a play on a couple of sort of research terms and things that get bandied about more in UX. Now, because I don't know everyone here at Healthwise, can I get a show of hands for people that consider themselves more of a user experience, kind of user-centered design, kind of sorters, more of an information architect, ontologist kind of person, content creation and development. So, okay, so we've got a range. I'm not trying to label people, I'm just trying to sort of gauge sort of, the group that I'm going to be talking with. So there's something for everyone in this. So basically, just to give you an idea, I'm just going to give you a very quick background. Just to make everything clear, I'm going to give a definition of taxonomy that you can either love, hate, accept, or reject. That's fine. But I'm just going to be using that just as a sort of like a boundary around what I'm doing. But it's more actually around the in the wild. And in the wild refers to real activity that we can observe, and also the things that I do as a practitioner. So my day job, I'm a director of user experience at a Meridian-based startup called Kordata, and we work on building basically a platform that enables businesses to configure their own data models and to also enhance data collection through mobile devices. So we do a whole ton of different things. I am what's referred to as the full stack UX. That means that I do everything from early conceptual, cognitive modeling, low fidelity prototyping, high fidelity pixel perfect, get into the React.js files. I basically, team of one at the moment, I do that whole gamut, and I've done that in other roles as well. I'm also going to touch on what is R, but I'm not really focusing on too much about what it is. It's just sort of a tasting, a sample. I'm going to show you how I've used R to work towards developing a taxonomy. I'm not showing you a finished one. I'm showing you a work in progress to give you an idea about how I can take, potentially, or anyone can take, a large corpus of data, unstructured data, and be able to derive some kind of meaning from it. And then just some Q&A if we have time. So I'm just going to move on. So my background is very layered. My focus has been on cognition. I have an academic background, but I also have a practitioner design background. But my thing has been around distributed cognition. It's the idea that cognition is not just an internal neurological process that happens in the head. It happens also as a result of interacting between people and between artifacts. So, you know, if it's like, well, what does that mean? It's like, well, my one head and brain cannot fly an aircraft. To fly an aircraft, we need the control tower, we need the software, we need the hardware, we need a co-pilot, we need a pilot, we need a set of processes, we need, you know, a mental framework, we need, you know, all of these kinds of things that bound a very complex activity, which is taking off, staying in the air, and landing safely. So, you know, it's cognition more complex in everyday life. So I sort of look at the practical stuff. I'm more of a systems thinker, but I like to think of myself as a creative systems thinker. Socio-technical systems, if that's familiar. I also have the sort of user-centered design. So, you know, interaction design, information design, slightly different, visual, things around mobility and devices, and I just call all of the rest of the ilities and the ologies, which is what you end up doing. My doctorate was looking at, I'm just going to read it. I think it kind of makes sense. No, it doesn't. So basically, I was looking at emergent leadership behaviors distributed throughout global teams. And so I was looking at the complexity of emergent leadership behavior. And so I did qualitative research, understanding what people actually did in these distributed teams across multiple continents, time zones, trying to understand the complexity of the cognition that was going on within the team, and then seeing if that explained or was part of a pattern of someone emerging to become a leader, not necessarily as a formal leader. So it was a whole bunch of things. Very glad that I did it, very glad that I'm finished. So, but it informs my everyday work. Okay, so I just want to get to the taxonomy. I'm quite a fan of Heather's, the accidental taxonomist, if you've ever heard of her. But basically, I'm just referring to taxonomy, not in the botanical sense, but just as an idea of a control vocabulary, a hierarchy, a way of like grouping things together, you know, giving it a sort of its own separate sort of identity in relation to other things. But that's about as detailed as I'm going to get. So I'm sorry, information science people, I'm not going to go any deeper than that. But that's basically, I'm just using it as an organizing, you know, principle to make sense of, you know, other larger amounts of information. So here's the in the wild. So information architecture, because yes, I can put my hat on and I do information architecture. So I look at text data, I look at those things, I have to come up with, you know, metadata, I have to come up with ways of planning and implementing and having something that makes sense to our solutions team as well as the development team. I have to have things that are reusable. I have to sort of cover the whole gamut. So IA in the wild is sort of what I do. It's quick and dirty. There's a lot of prototyping, and it's very iterative. So a lot like, you know, Wendy's experience as she was sort of going through and showing us that whole process. I'm going to give you a sort of a justification as to what I also mean about being in the wild. And it's about the kind of data that we use to inform our design and the ultimate user experience. And so one thing that I'm very much a proponent of is trying to capture something in the wild as authentic as it can possibly be. Now, that's obviously not going to be the case for everybody, but I wanted to just use a visual. So here's a practical hands-on exercise for everyone here in the room and for anyone who's watching. I'm just going to give you about 30 seconds to look at an image, and I want you just to come up with a couple of things that you can say or infer or interpret from that image. So here is image number 1. For those people that don't have a visual, it's actually a male and a female lion in a zoo enclosure, and the lion is standing what looks like to be a carved pumpkin, jack-o'-lantern. I've just put that facetious tag at captive audience. So just give yourself a few seconds. Think about what is it that we can infer or that we know based upon what we see here. So now I'm going to put it to the audience. It's near Halloween, so there's some social event. Okay, yep. We're in a place that celebrates Halloween. Anything else? What about the animals themselves? Lording over the pumpkin, there seems to be like a power, potentially a power differential, a subservient potential pose, a more sort of defensive, aggressive pose. Yeah. She is more interested in the pumpkin. Yeah. Okay, so those are things that if we just had that to base our understanding about lions, it would perhaps give us a different picture. Now, let's look at this image. Take a few seconds to look at it. What do we see in this picture that we hadn't seen in the previous picture? So for those people that don't have the visuals, it's a picture of a lioness, female lion, chasing after what looks like in the shot a single zebra in an open plain savanna grassland in the daytime. It's open. Survival. There's activity, there's hunting.
There's a sense of speed that
they're moving very quickly. What do we notice about the lioness compared to the first picture? She's dominant, she's active, she's the only one hunting for food. Male, not in the picture, literally and figuratively. So think about that in terms of I'm interviewing someone about something, and even though they're doing their best to give me what they think will help my study or my research, in a lot of ways, they're a captive audience. They're there for a reason that's not just about what they're doing. And so often we get representations of what people think they're doing, and they're not actually the same. And so I know that seems very picky, but when it comes to the nuances, those little things around designing and thinking about language, that makes all the difference. So we go from this, and ideally, as an IA and as a UX person in general, I want to try and get as many of those or get exposure to as many of those as possible. In the real world, it doesn't happen all the time, but ultimately we're aiming for that because there's such a rich picture of information that can come from just observing what is happening without necessarily being directly in the action itself. So what has that got to do with R? Well, for me as a team of one, and I think Wendy sort of put this very well too, when you're in a very small group and you've got very aggressive deadlines, you need as much help as you can. And I'm in a small company. There's one of me. There's 8 developers, 3 to 4 DevOps, QA. There's a solutions team. There's a marketing team, but there's one UX. And so I've got to be able to do things across the board very, very quickly and efficiently. And also because being a startup and just being a small company, economically, which is an issue as well. And so for me, I was looking for a tool to mine data. And I wanted to find something that was cost effective. I'd heard about R. R is basically an analytical, quantitative, piece of software. It was actually created by 2 New Zealanders. Won't hold that against it. It's like Canadian to America. It's the same thing. But 2 very, very great Kiwis developed R. It's now become the most cited and most used quantitative tool within academic journal publications. Also, to give you an idea, what's happening to my... here we go. R is actually also used in industry, and it also has partnerships with big data companies like Hadoop. So it's finding its way, and this is only just a sample, but some sort of brand names up here to give you an idea across multiple sectors. So it's sort of become the data science du jour, and it was primarily quantitative, but then I discovered that it then allowed you to do things with text. It wasn't just about quantitative numerical calculations and things. And so I could still take text data that I had, large amounts of text data, and be able to at least, like Lee Starr says, sort things out. I was able to kind of get a sense of what the groupings and the concepts and the labelings were. So I thought, okay, there's one of me, and I've got like several gigs of data. How on earth am I going to get through this? This is going to be a tricky one. So I explored a little, and I went all excited, read up about it, went and looked at all the dummies books about R and thought, okay, this will be cool. And then I installed it on my Mac. It's cross-platform. And then I got this. I thought, oh, okay, all right. So user experience wise, not so great, but there's basically, 4 panels. You'll get an idea of it. Essentially, we've got, it's almost like a programming language. So for me, I deliberately decided not to program when I was about 14 years old on a BBC Acorn microcomputer because I just thought it was boring. And so the whole idea of having to write scripty kind of stuff to get it to look at data to me was a little bit frightening. But essentially, there is a console area, this sort of larger lower left square, that you can basically put the script, run the script through its paces. To the right here, we've got this thing. It's basically, they call it packages. It's a library. It's basically a mountain of stuff that does things for you. I like to think of them more as a plugin conceptually rather than a library. But it does some really, really cool things. And so I thought, okay, well, what am I going to get out of this? I actually found through my work, through my day job, I got a lot out of it. However, for NDA purposes, I can't show any of that to you. And so what I did is I took a worked example and just sort of went, okay, well, if I use this data set, this is kind of following the way that I would use R to kind of get a little deeper into understanding the overall sort of the emergent taxonomy of data that's happened in the wild. So my focus. I so went yes when Wendy mentioned that whip Nana theme. I'm like, I am cooking with gas because I have also hooked onto that whole Hillary meme. This is her in a texting meme. I wanted to find a data set that was interesting, that was potentially topical. It doesn't reflect my political affiliations whatsoever, but I can't vote in this country anyway, so it's okay. But I took this data set, Hillary's private emails. There is a website called Kaggle. It's basically, I like to think of it as a competition, aka, you know, a lightly veiled recruitment website for budding data scientists. And there's oodles and oodles of data sets that are up there that for free you can go and access and play with using R or Python or Perl or whatever script you want to come up with some insights. And so what I did was I came across this. Now, the interesting thing, the original state of this data, to give you an idea, so about 7,000 pages equivalent of emails provided to the public in PDF format. So State Department was really making it accessible for analysis. But then the Kaggle team, thank you Kaggle, actually cleaned and normalized it. So they were able to turn it into something that was digital, that you could then manipulate. It's publicly available, and I've got the email here and you can see it. And there's about 40 or 50 other people that have already started analyzing that. So, which I thought was kind of cool. So I took the private email controversy because I'm not really totally cognizant around American politics. So I thought, oh, I might learn something here. Oh, this is what happens. I just had to do it. It was a UX-y thing, but they got an error page. And I just thought that this was such a great, meaningful message. I just had to share it with you because that's what happened when I was trying to do something there. So a little bit of UI, but cute just the same. Okay, so here, and I've just got it, this is most of the R script. So Paul, this is for you, feast your eyes. I have a copy of this script and it can be saved as a text file. It looks kind of complicated, but what basically we get to do in R is that we have this lot of data and then we create basically what we call variables, and it's the variable that then becomes the new data point that you then look at. So you might have text, 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 and then you say, oh, I want to have word frequency about this text. That then becomes a separate object that you get to play with. The data itself originally stays unchanged, but then all of the things that you can create, so you might be cleaning it. This is the clean data. That's the original data. So it's something that you can go back, you can tweak, you can iterate. And so basically what this process involves, and I'll sort of go through it as I show the examples, essentially is getting it in the system, making sure it's in a format that R can read, cleaning it, putting it into a matrix form, and then start to actually look at, are there any categories, are there any clusters, are there any patterns, and you know, are there ways I can visualize it? Okay, so here's an example. What I did, one of the visual tools, because when you've got like over 7,000 pages of stuff, including all of the metadata and stuff around emails, which you have to clean out, I decided, look, I'm just going to try and visualize and get a sense of what this is about. So I used a library, a plugin called Word Cloud. So it was able to visually represent. I set the set seed is just a random number generator. It's, you know, it's valuable if you're needing to reproduce this in research. But I was basically saying, hey, anything, any word after the clean version that happens at least 50 times. Well, I actually had to kill the process at this point because it kept growing and it was going to crash. And I thought, okay, I better revisit that. But already I'm getting, you know, a few things here and there. Just so you know, it's already cleaned out all of the punctuation, the white spaces, It's basically done stemming. I put in a whole bunch of words to be automatically removed. So there's a whole lot of what I would term white noise that's already been stripped, not from the original data set, but from this other piece that I then want to look at. So a lot of the hard yards have already been done. If you saw the original CSV file, it's, oh my gosh, there's just so much what I would call, for me, junk that I'd have to sort through. So then what I thought I'd do is actually go down to, like, all right, let's just get down to the 100 most frequent. It took me a few iterations. Like, first I did the most 500, and then again my machine started to sort of complain because there was a lot of text. They're quite verbal, quite articulate. And so here, all I'm basically saying is, get rid of all of the sparse terms, all of the stuff that doesn't happen that much. Go to that matrix that I created. Use these colors. They're not material colors. They're just the colors. This was built by developers. So, it's still got a way to go in terms of visualization. But then I was saying the most frequent 100 words. And this is then how it presented it, which for someone, if you don't have any kind of limitation with color perception, this can be very, very useful. And also the size as well. So for me, ironically, things popped out like release, Benghazi, like, speech, good. I think Obama's in there. Yeah, Obama. So there are all of these things that were coming up. Not perfectly formed. There's a few jumbly words I couldn't split up. But it gave me a sense of what the focus was. So this is over 7,000 pages of email. This is kind of what's bubbling to the surface. Now, what I'm showing you here is not from Hillary, because it kept getting stuck. And that's one of the challenges with R. It's open source, which means it's free, awesome, but it's relying upon a community of developers that donate their time. And so support is not necessarily like picking up, a hotline and asking someone to, help walk you through. It's very diverse. It can take a long time to troubleshoot, to go down a rabbit hole, to go through, I don't know how many postings of Stack Exchange. And so that troubleshooting takes a long time. But what I wanted to show you is that once I'd done that exploratory work, we can then get down to basically clustering, and we can start to see keywords coming together, or at least the beginnings of what I could say, this is a group of words that has some kind of meaning, and I can begin to think of a label or a kind of a system that help make sense of that. So that's just with a cluster. So R, with its programming, can go through and highlight and say, hey, yeah, these are all these words, and hey, they're grouped this way. You can then also, and it gets a little hard when you've got lots and lots of words, but you can understand the relationships between certain words. And so, ironically, a lot of things for Hillary, it was all about the state, but things like Benghazi kind of were hidden under a whole bunch of other things. So it was enough of a visual indicator just to sort of at least make me more aware of how complex the data was, and that there are also other visual ways that I can interrogate the data as well and represent it. So in a nutshell, rich data, my mantra, from the wild helps ground any taxonomies that I try and develop with, whether it's for software or just information structures in general. Are an open source tool, continually evolving, which is great. There are now hundreds of libraries or plugins, and it's improving all the time. And text mining with R, as far as I'm concerned, is an IA's best friend. So thank you. And do we have any questions? Yes, Carl. Yeah, use the mic.
So did you end up building a taxonomy out of the Clinton email stuff?
At 11:59 p.m. last night, I decided not to. That was the thing. I tried to do all of that end to end in less than an hour. So from like raw data CSV file of, oh, I forgot to mention, it was about 28 meg. It's not a large file, but 28 meg of text is a lot. So from starting from raw to actually getting to that point where I at least had clusters to begin saying that there are sections, it took me under an hour. So I stopped. But I could keep going and come up with one.
Yeah, okay.
So, yeah.
Thanks.
I have a question. The Kaggle site I've never heard of, and I found it really interesting. And what immediately occurred to me is WikiLeaks. Are you aware of any efforts out there that by information architects that are consistently like mining WikiLeaks material and producing like information architectures, navigation, some kind of summaries of what those things, what's being released, or outside of WikiLeaks, other kinds of things like that?
Yeah, I'm not personally aware, and I haven't seen anything either in sort of practitioner literature or in academic research around, I think the text mining piece, it's only really just starting to take off. So out of the 100 odd or so libraries, there are about 10 to 12 that would relate to anything to do with text mining per se. So I think the community, the research community and practitioner community as a whole is still, really trying to get the most, or trying to understand how they can really leverage it. For me, it just seemed like such an obvious, as soon as I saw the dendrogram, I was like, oh yeah, that's it. Oh, that'll get me much further along. So yeah, so no, not at this point, but as it expands, I think it'll get used for a whole range of things. Any other questions? Oh.
How long did it take you to learn it, like using the scripts and stuff?
Okay. Fess up, even though I have a PhD, I went online, paid my money, joined Coursera, and I actually started doing the data science specialization that Johns Hopkins has available. And so, it would be, I've done about 5 or 6 different courses, that take about 4 to 5 weeks each. Very sort of hands-on, practical, it's a typical MOOC, learning environment. So really it's up to you, self-directed learning. But it gave me enough of a framework to be able to work out how to get things set up, and then also how to ask the right questions about, getting help. And so really for me, I think the essence of learning it, the hardest part is just understanding how important it is to really know what the data is and then how to prepare it and clean it and prep it. And once you have that and you choose the appropriate library, it's a very straightforward thing. But it's that cleaning and preparation of the data that actually, took the longest and always does. So yeah, but Coursera. Anything else? No? Yep. Nope. We're done. We're at time. Thank you.
You can grab Sam at the break, I assume. Absolutely. All right. Absolutely. Who doesn't want to play with R after that? Oh. Let me just start with who was a fangirl of R already. Just saying. Christine Maldonado.
It's free. I mean, think of how much you pay with SPSS. IBM was not very happy about R when it started to sort of, emerge as not just as an alternative, but it's now a major go-to data science piece that's used by, you name any company that deals with large volumes of data, they're using it, not just but as a part of how they do and understand their user data. So.
Thanks, Sam. All right, we will do a quick raffle, and then our train will leave on time with Maria at 11:30. So while you set up, Maria, maybe I'll have a guest picker. I have a Katie McGee that will do it. Let's see, what are we picking for? Let's do understanding context. Survey says Sam Kanta. Ironic. Wonderful. Thank you. All right. More books. The polar bear book goes to Jason Smith. Are you here yet? All right. Whoop. Back goes Jason Smith. Lauren Morris. Woo. Go. Thanks, sir. All right. One more, maybe.
Justin Morgan.
Justin Morgan, are you here? Oh, yes, you are. Go. All right. And how to make sense of any mess. We should buy a box of these.
Judy Mark.
Judy, wow, how fitting is that? You are like chief mess fixer-upper. All right. Next, we will go to Maria. And we're a few minutes ahead, so you can, are you set up, Maria?
I'm set up.
All right. Well, maybe we'll get started a little early.
Okay, sounds great.